It's high noon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Foul Play episode number 11. We have stage 2 behind us now officially, as the playoffs have ended minutes ago from when we are recording. It literally just happened, so we're going to give you guys a little bit of rapid reaction discussion to that, I'm sure, as we head into what is, by design, a short, laid-back week here. We've only got a little bit of recap discussion to do from how things went during the second stage of Overwatch League. But before I go any farther, I would be remiss if I did not introduce my co-hosts here. We, of course, have the one and only, as I stall for time to find my trumpet sound effect, Lord Asmith in the house.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Asmith, thank you for joining us again.
I'm so glad to be here, guys. I really appreciate the fanfare. I know I know you're a big fan now of just calling me Lord, so you know, just keep it up. It's gonna be there permanently.
It's just about my least favorite thing about the show, but nonetheless, I'm more upset that like we didn't get the knockdown drag out we got last time of like both players playing great, and instead we just got both players that really probably kind of hurt people in fantasy on the overall anyways, but yours hurt them just a little less.
In our defense, we both picked Diva players.
It's true. So we did know. It was more of a relative to each other bet than it was you should be playing these guys bet.
Yeah, totally fair.
But also joining myself and Asmith is TheBlevins. How you doing today, buddy?
Joining yourself and who?
Asmith?
And who?
I believe it's Lord Asmith. There you go. I gave you another trumpet. I gave you another trumpet just to make sure it was right. But Blevins, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing super great, as you can see, rocking the rally cap for my boys right there. Can
see very clearly that you do not know what a rally cap is, but nonetheless,
not even a
little
little
I've redefined it.
You're just willfully incorrect about rally caps, but nonetheless, narrowly avoided. Man, it would have been. It's hard to lose an exhibition match and call it a disaster, but I think twice in a row had it gone against the New York Excelsior. Yeah, it would have been pretty close.
I would have started the show like. I mean, like
I wouldn't have even shown up. I 100% would.
That's fair.
There's no chance.
Yeah, it probably would have been needed, and we could have made all of the choking jokes that we want. I would have basically been able to practice my choking jokes for when we were on the flagship show tomorrow. But nonetheless, we do have the Stage 2 champions set and locked in here with the New York Excelsior. So congratulations to all NYXL fans, as well as, I mean, I guess the players themselves. They did a little bit too. We can congratulate them as well as the fans. Though I'm going to give the MVP for the stage to the 5 Deadly Venoms over there, because they got that sweet... intro commercial thing going on in between the rounds. I love seeing that. Shout outs to the great Root Bear, a fan of the show and ATP alum. So always great to see NY doing well. Also, though, I think the surprise of the stage, at least the playoff weekend, was the Philadelphia Fusion, who were pretty much like squarely number 4, number 5 in the probability going into the weekend about who would make it into the playoffs. They made it all the way to the finals.
Above Valiant in terms of like needing to like get out your abacus in terms of knowing what to do, or like the likelihood.
Yeah, and I think as the weekend opened, I think it was like the Gladiators held their own destiny in their hands. Then they blew it and opened the door for Seoul, who just had to win out. Then Seoul blew it. Green Wall! And then it just became like Philly's game. And then there was a moment when like the Gladiators had it back, but they needed to 4-0 their match, and a crazy weekend on the overall.
But, it was crazy that both Boston and Houston were the biggest Philly fans this week.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't rooting them for it. I was glad Houston opened the door for the Gladiators, but more so because I picked the Gladiators to win the stage going into the weekend.
Can we just talk about like how Boston has been 2 stages in a row been like a deciding game? Like they have been like the spoilers or potential spoilers in 2 games, you know, in both stages it's in. I mean, it's kind of crazy. The matchmaking can't have been better.
Yeah, it's definitely working out so far. The end of this, both stages have been, very hype with the opportunities and just the movement in the playoff race itself. So really, really enjoying the timing of everything. The length of the stages seems just about right to make these races really, really interesting. So props to everybody that's been involved in the Overwatch League so far. Been a lot of fun. But we do have a couple of topics to talk about here. Might as well get right into them. The first of which is, how did you guys do this past week? So Lord Asmith, talk to us about how your fantasy week went this week.
All right. Well, I will say my new scoring system expert league team is making a comeback. We are having a resurgence. 2 weeks in a row, we've gotten a win and we've gotten big wins. We figured it out. I don't know what happened, but we're back together. We're on track. We're getting up there. We're in third place third place right now, and I'm feeling strong about it. Kyle got badly beaten. I'm not even gonna, and then I lost to some lowly peasant in the old scoring league. I will say, Baby Bay not playing has, it wasn't fun. But I do have the hope with Rascal in effect on my old scoring team that I might have a potential future in my hands of coming back.
When both of those players start next stage for the LA Valiant, they might actually be able to put up some points.
Whatever. Get out.
Blevins, how'd you do this week, buddy?
I finally suffered a loss in old scoring system. Please Play Pine has suffered. We've suffered our second loss due to me accidentally playing Undead. For what it's worth, I didn't really have much better of an option, but I just forgot to sub him out. So we lost pretty big there, considering I was down a player. But that team actually is in a little bit of trouble. I need to scour the free agent list and maybe finagle some trades there to get that team back where we need to be. But Jonak, wish your girlfriend was hot like me, still undefeated and looking stronger than ever.
Yeah, honestly, I played against you in the new scoring format league, and rumor has it SBB and Striker on the same team is really, really difficult to beat this stage. Who would have thought? Yeah. I kind of knew going in I didn't have much chance there. But I did beat some royal jerk. I'm trying not to swear or say anything that would make iTunes mad at us.
What's that royal jerk's name?
I don't know. Nobody knows. But I'd be some idiot in the old scoring format league.
Royal descent.
Yeah, see, some idiot of royal descent for sure. Took him down there. So on the overall, not too bad. But that's going to transition us into kind of the expert league recaps we'll do at the end of each of these stages, just to give you guys an idea of where all the podcasting friends and the new scoring format is a lot of the high noon staff, things like that. But the leagues we're talking about in depth on the show in the old scoring format. In first place, we have Blazin' Bob. So he is leading the way here in the old scoring format, followed by a couple of smart guys, a couple of guys I like a little bit here. Blevins and DeathBlow in second and third place, respectively. So, Asmith, how you doing in this league? Do you know?
Look,
I only looked so far down the standings. I didn't see you.
I drafted too many fuel players. My heart got in the way. And it did not end well.
Seventh place for Asmith to rip the Band-Aid off of that. But it gets better for Mr. Asmith because in the new scoring format, we have in first place Blevins. And then in second place, we have Taco. So he's got Jonak there, and it's definitely been working well for him there. And then in third place, we do have a bit of a logjam here. So we have myself, Moirai, and Asmith here, all in third place. That league is very, very much up for grabs, considering it got a pretty late start since we drafted it after the new scoring format came out. It's only been 5, 6, 7 weeks, something in that range. I can't remember for sure. 7? Okay. So a lot of progress there, but anybody's game, except for maybe Asmith, is probably pretty far back in the old scoring format. But Yeah, which one of these guys? I mean, so we might as well take a quick second. Is there any debate here between the scoring formats for you guys? Are you enjoying one of these leagues over the other? I have a feeling I know which one Asmith's enjoying more, but
I really actually do. I enjoy the new scoring format better, but I don't have as many gripes about the old scoring format as I thought I would, because I actually appreciate that different types of players scored more points, if that makes any sense. Like I like in like fantasy football, not all positions score the same amount of points. Like, you know, your quarterbacks score a lot of points, and I'd be fine with that. Like I don't think we have to balance it out. But that being said, the new scoring format seems like because of the few amount of teams in the league, it seems like the new scoring format, you actually have a chance. In the old scoring format with only 12, how many teams? Yeah, 12 teams in the league. It doesn't seem like there's just enough to make it work.
Yeah, Blevins, anything to add to that or no?
Yeah, I like new scoring format on the overall, but I do agree with Asmith that there is some legs to the old scoring format. It seems like it's almost more like if you were new to fantasy, I would say 100% do new scoring format. Don't even think about it. But if you're doing a challenge, like honestly, a 10-man like expert league where everyone is really doing the research and trying, a 10-man old scoring system format is a hard game to play. And it is, and that the pool for that game dries up real quick. And it's kind of an interesting game, being like, okay, well, I need to go for my top scoring DPS players. Like, obviously they're the most valuable, but like I need to make sure that I get enough. Like, you actually, in the old scoring system, it might be correct to pick up players that don't play just so that they don't get you negative points. Like, that is a legitimate thing. If you're playing a 10-man league, like, you're better off playing Sato, because he's not going to get you negative points, where some of the supports very well could get you negative points.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I think 10-man old scoring format is a dead game and not very much fun. But at
definitely something.
at 8-6, I do think there's definitely something to the old scoring format. Positional scarcity is a nice thing. It almost helps in a way. It keeps things interesting, and it lets you can plan for it, right? So it hasn't felt unfair. Like, there's not felt anything wrong with the old scoring format to me. But I do still think new scoring format is a little bit better. I very much so expected the new scoring format to be leaps and bounds more fun than the old one once I started doing it, and I just haven't really felt that one, so I was a bit surprised there.
Sure.
I think the new scoring format makes you feel like your players are doing as much as they are in the game, versus the old scoring format where, like, you're just trying to put a Band-Aid on the wound for most of your supports and tanks in that format.
Yeah, unless you've got one of the few, like the gestures, the fissures, or what have you, that can actually put up numbers.
Yeah,
it's pretty rough. But we're gonna move on here, guys, and we want to talk about some of the news and some of the big things that happened this week. And at the top of the list is the debut of the San Francisco Shock's new Tracer player, Sinatra. Finally 18 years old, was able to hit the stage. Had a pretty good weekend on the overall, but kind of like, I don't know, at least like I was saying going into it, like, I don't know that this is gonna I think it's an upgrade, but I don't know that it makes them a significantly better team out of the gates. Like, Tracer wasn't the problem for the team going into this weekend. And we really kind of got to see that play out, where maybe the wins weren't there for the team on the overall, but for fantasy purposes, I thought Sinatra had a pretty good week. He finished at the number 10 DPS spot with 93 points in his first match, 94 in his second, for 187 on the week. Good for your number 10 overall DPS player. There was also a bit of substitutioning going on for these players. We saw Baby Bay get by far the shortest end of the stick. Dante got to play a little bit beside Sinatra here, but I'm wondering if you guys think this switching of DPS players is going to continue, because Architect is going to be joining the San Francisco Shock, and he's a very, very well-respected projectile player. So, Asmith, is this going to be something that continues? Because it's really hurting basically all of their fantasy values right now, the way they're playing them this week.
Yeah, I think it's still going to continue in some aspect. I mean, look at what the Fusion are doing right now with Snillo and Carpe and EQO. Kind of look at that as a guideline, because there are maps where Tracer Widow is a thing, and can be really, really good. and you could end up seeing Sinatra, Baby Bay on those maps and no Architect. You know, they're like some legit thought processes of, oh well, we could make it work, and if you min max the system, you might be able to find it to work in your favor. But for fantasy purposes, it could end up hurting them. But I think Sinatra, as long as Tracer is in the meta, Sinatra is going to be a must play.
Blevins, how are you handling San Francisco Shock players now that they're fully unlocked? At least the DPS core is fully unlocked.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Asmith. Sinatra did well enough, and Tracer is like, and we'll talk about this in the recap. Tracer's at the top of your point scores. Sinatra seems to be like their Tracer option here, so I'd play Tracer. I would play Sinatra, but the other ones, like especially when Architect gets in, it's like they might be doing a Philadelphia Fusion type of play, or they might even be doing what NYXL used to do when Pine actually decided that he wanted to play, where you're going to have some sort of mix between the three or potentially even four. So Baby Bay, I mean, we saw it this week. Like, you can't, unless they release a statement that says that they're going to play him. But even then, you really can't rely on him. And especially when Architect comes in, it's going to take, you know, at the very least a week or two to know what their philosophy behind their subs are going to be.
Yeah, once Architect gets here, I'm of the boat where I'm only playing Sinatra. He's the only one I would consider. Given the way we saw Tracer kind of dominate the meta here, I'm very excited to play Sinatra if I own him too. I think you can just kind of roll him out basically right away. At this point, now that we've seen him, I don't expect him to spend more than, you know, one map off in a set at all at any point here going forward. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on here, and I'm just fire sailing Baby Bay for absolutely anything I can get for him at this point. I think so.
I have him. I'm trying to figure something out, but I don't
that's
think
a big flop too, considering how I would imagine he's a you know, potentially a first rounder for a league, or second round maybe, depending on how much you valued supports, but like definitely like an early round pick for a lot of people.
Yeah, he was up there, had a lot of hype around him. It was just, you know, and we always knew that they were going to be making changes in the Tracer role, but his was the job that seemed safer, right? Because Architect was not thought of yet, right? He was unsigned, so we didn't kind of see that coming. So it's definitely going to be rougher on Baby Bay owners than Dante owners, I think, especially since
you definitely get shadow burn. You definitely get shadow burned by owning Baby Bay this stage for sure.
Well,
yeah. It's his turn, 100%. It's Baby Bay owner's turn. After
I would almost rather own IDDQD than Baby Bay at this point.
I would say I would use the phrase Shadowburn owners, but that feels like exclusively me, judging by how many leagues I own him in. But
I have him in one too, man. I feel you.
Moving on, though, we do have a team that I gotta say had a pretty solid week. The wins weren't there, but the schedule was brutal for the Dallas Fuel this week.
The performance was there.
The performance was definitely there. We saw.
I was definitely sweating it.
Yeah, that one. I was almost rooting for. Almost, it didn't happen, but I was almost rooting for Dallas there, just to knock you down a peg, just to give me something to just throw at you. But what we saw here was different from the Dallas Fuel, was a different tank lineup than we've seen from them in the past. So Siegel was in playing the Diva role, which pushed Mickey over to main tank. Word has come from Dallas Fuel now, who's made a promise to be more transparent in addressing team issues with their fans so that people know a little bit about what's going on. And part of that was Taimu is not really happy being a main tank, and he's regretting that switch, wants to go back to DPS. And that kind of leaves them short-handed, since OGE is officially signed to the team, also officially suspended for 4 games for a boosting activity.
For only 2 more games.
Yeah, really only 2 games, because it's effective immediately, but he's not here yet. So the first 2 weeks of his suspension, he won't even be here and wouldn't have been playing anyways. So it does work out for Dallas a little bit there. But the big thing here is that Rascal is now in over AKM and didn't come out, I don't think, at all this weekend. Is that correct?
Did not
Did
come
not,
out at
right.
all. AKM played 0.
Yeah, played 0 maps, and we got a little insight before. We were, wondering why are we seeing AKM play Genji, things like that, and apparently Rascal decided he was not up to playing that week in particular when the whole issue came about. That's a discussion probably more suited for the flagship show, but from a fantasy standpoint, I want to look at Rascal being in the lineup now over AKM. He did not have the best week, from a pure point scoring standpoint. He was the number 16 DPS player, but 143 points from Rascal's not the worst. I mean, we see a clear line between tracer players and flex projectile players and how they're scoring. So Rascal didn't do too bad in comparison to a lot of the other flex players, but I personally expected more. Asmith, Lord Asmith, what were you thinking you would see from Rascal once he finally took over, and was this it?
Well, I was expecting dominance, and in parts he did. I mean, when he was on that May, you saw God tier Rascal. But then you kind of looked a little further, and his Genji may not be the best in the league, but it's still very good. But I mean, ultimately, we're in a time and age in fantasy where Genji players are second fiddle to the tracer players, and literally anybody above Shanghai tracer player is going to be better than close to the top tier, Genji player. And it's an interesting, mind that we're in right now, but right now the team just look better as a whole. And that's what you're concerned about, because if the team's looking better, your individual players are probably going to do better. And let's just say, as much as we love to give, Taimu wasn't, was not feeling tank. Obviously, he might not have been, but he was also on the crapper. He was on the crapper, and that's why Eagle got to play. Did y'all hear the story?
Yeah, that apparently
Okay.
it was just Taimu taking too long in the bathroom. The scrim opponent wanted to start playing, and so they just said, "Mickey, play Winston since you did forever ago, and Siegel, you've been practicing Diva, so jump in." And it just did really well. I guess they just kind of rolled that scrim and decided to go with it.
And I expect that to happen the next two. Then this first two games while OGE's suspended, or still suspended. But I think it's going to change a lot, and I think come stage 3, we're going to see a revitalized Dallas team, a team that is no longer a laughing stock of the league. They may not win stage 2, Hippo. As much as I love you, or as much as I love you, They probably won't win stage 3, but they might be in contention. They're not going to come back and make it to the playoffs. I think they're pretty much statistically alive. But you could see some legit chances of them turning their season around with a whole change of scenery or change of setup for different players, and that could be good for all Dallas Fuel fantasy players.
I think. Well, see, here's the thing though. Like, what does it mean for the DPSs? Because if Taimu's moving back over to DPS, you've got Rascal, you've got Taimu, maybe Seagull stays as a tank, you've got AKM still. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do there? Like, if you were an AKM owner, you got burned this week. Like, is AKM just going to sit the bench now, or is he going to get equal playing time with Rascal? At which point they're both unplayable, right? Like, if they're both splitting playing time, and Rascal, who, I mean, you look at, he played 9 maps, had 143 points. Like, 143 points doesn't seem terrible, but when you look at the person right below him, Surefour had 138 points. He only played 5 maps. So it's like Surefour almost had more than he had 121 in one game. So like Rascal didn't come out and only got 143 points. What is like a Rascal owner going to do when he's only playing, 5 maps, 6 maps?
I mean, if you're considering playing Rascal, you're probably pretty desperate. So not many people have Rascal and they're like, oh God, he's one of the players I'm relying on. So it's probably just. But
I don't know, I don't know if there's a non-effect Dallas. I don't even know if there's a non-effect Dallas Fuel player that I want to be owning necessarily right now.
I mean, not now. I don't think so. I think custom might be your only chance.
OGE is one I would like to own.
Yeah, OGE.
Yeah, that's true.
But the answer to what what can it really do for them is, look at what it's done for, and it's hard to judge here, right? We're almost being robbed of the comparison because of the way that the Gladiators handle hydration and Surefour and Asher and everybody rotating like that. But I think that's really your answer is look at how they improved when Fissure came in and really gave them a drastic improvement at main tank. Whether or not, OGE is not going to be as good as Fissure is, right? I think that's safe to say, but the level of upgrade might be equivalent. So we might see a good solid uptake here from the players.
DPS player to actual main tank,
right.
Just a little.
So it's going to be interesting to see. Definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. I would definitely. It's a good time if you believe in Rascal and you believe in what's happening with the Dallas Fuel. It's a good time to target him in a trade because he's got some serious potential in a later stage. Yeah, and you can probably buy him pretty cheap. Moving on here, the last thing to talk about was there's been a few teams now that like to do this rotating DPS core, and Philadelphia seems to be jumping up and doing a similar thing here. We saw Snillo play a lot in his first week after being eligible. They had some easy matchups. They decided to sit Carpe, but now we saw Carpe never leave, and Snillo still came in to give the Philadelphia Fusion a Tracer Widow composition on a few maps. 66, I believe it was, the one that they really wanted to focus on that. It carried over into the playoffs, which tells me that that's the ideal strategy and the ideal plan for this team. So how are you guys using this information to evaluate EQO, who suddenly feels really risky, right? Because if we get into a Tracer, let's say Tracer... Sombra meta next stage, which I think a lot of people think might happen. What is that going to do? Are suddenly EQO and Shadowburn going to be worthless for fantasy owners? Or Asmith, what are your thoughts there? Lord Asmith, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Here's the problem with that whole situation. We don't even know what patch we're playing on, do we? Like, I have no idea what patch we're playing on. Has it? Yeah, because they could hotfix this Reaper patch and put it in, and then all of a sudden we're playing with Reaper buffed, and you're like, what just happened? So
all we know is that it will not include Brigida until stage 4. That has been confirmed.
What we know right now is that EQO is the best projectile player for this team, and that's what we know. Because even though Surefour may be technically a better Genji, possibly a better Shadowburn. Yeah, sorry. Maybe technically a better Genji and Pharah, EQO has more flexibility, and it's arguable at best to say Shadowburn's better than him. What we do know is Snillo's good. Snillo is a very good Tracer, but they prefer Carpe on Tracer rather than Snillo.
As they should, right?
As they should, yeah. Carpe is amazing. So what you can extrapolate so far is that the only thing we've seen Snillo play at a super, super high level has been Tracer, and they have Carpe. So we may not see as much Snillo as people are maybe anticipating.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to see a ton of Snillo unless he gets traded or something to a team where he's better than that team's Tracer, which is...
Oh man,
as good as Snillo is,
how much would you want that?
Snillo or Dante to Houston would be like a dream come true to me. But really, just kind of a perfect fit, because I do think Snillo's hero pool is a little bit narrow, and it's like there's exactly one need on Houston's DPS core right now.
Yeah.
So it does feel like it would be a perfect fit. But I'm more worried about just can I reliably use EQO, because if suddenly he's like the number 16 DPS player because Snillo comes in for 2 maps and every now and then gets to see some playing time, it's going to really hurt EQO, who's been great and shown a phenomenal versatility. The way he can go to Roadhog in a way that I don't think Shadowburn can, Soldier 76 in a way Shadowburn can, really helped cement him here. So
it's entirely possible too that like Shadowburn is still Shadowburn, right? He's not their starting Genji anymore, but what if they need like a map? Like, what if the meta calls for like Reaper Pharah for some reason, or something like weird where like, okay, some maps it's going to be Carpe Shadowburn, sometimes it's gonna be Carpe Snillo, and sometimes it's gonna be Carpe EQO, and sometimes it's gonna be EQO. Like,
we've seen metas in the past that were Soldier Genji based too, so we could see EQO and Shadowburn.
I don't think Shadowburn is necessarily out. So,
no.
I mean, if I'm an EQO owner, which, I mean, if you got him, you got him luckily on the waiver wire after he exploded, and we told you to pick him up, so you're welcome for that. But I mean, you bought low and now sell high. Like, they just got to the stage finals. Like, I can't imagine him being worth much more than he is right now. I honestly, like, I think he's a great player, and I think but from a fantasy perspective, sell. I'm in the sell.
But who would you want for him? Like, I mean, if you want to sell high, that's great. But like,
Sinatra?
I mean, we're
Find
looking
a tracer player.
Yeah, we're looking
soon.
But we're looking more and more into a meta or an upcoming future that there's a possibility that with players continually being added in the league right now, that teams are looking at maybe possibly rotating DPS more and more. I mean, do you think maybe like EQO for Linkser would be a good trade? Because I think
that would be an amazing.
That would be a phenomenal trade.
I think that would be
here's the thing. It's not like like the circumstances of EQO are not that you drafted him in the beginning of the league and he was the backbone of your team. That just can't possibly be the case because he didn't play. So you got him for nothing, and if you can trade him up in like a Linkser, who, by the way, is like the only, like, Linkser and Libero are the two non-tracer players in the sea of tracer players at the top of the point scores.
It's actually Linkser and Dream Casper are the ones, and there's
on the overall, but for this week, Libero also got up in there. But
I'm looking at the stage numbers.
For the stage, yes. I mean, Linkser for EQO would be a phenomenal trade. And if you're on the EQO side of that, getting rid of EQO, that is 100% snap that trade off as fast as you possibly can. Yeah. But if you can trade for any consistent player, I mean, maybe not Jake, because he's probably not going to, because he's also potentially splitting time as well. But if you can find a consistent player, maybe even a consistent support player, a good tank, like if you can trade EQO for a good tank, I would snap that off too if they're playing. Because,
and here's another one to support your argument a little bit. I'm going to throw out a trade offer that might sound ridiculous, but there's Fleta owners out there right now that are panicked and don't know what to do. He was tied with, we're going to be talking about this later, but so I won't give all the juicy stats, but he was the number 17 DPS player on the stage. EQO was 13. So you have tangible evidence to point to say, I think EQO might, they might point to it and say, if they're panicked about Fleta, well, maybe I'll just go get EQO. They're on the rise. They were in second place this stage. That's something you might be able to get kind of a bit of an overreaction there from somebody that's willing to move Fleta, because he did not, far from
trade.
Fleta's
as low as he's ever going to be. EQO is as high as he's ever going to be.
Yeah,
completely.
It's trading. It's to bring the Magic references. It's trading your standard playable mythic foils for your legacy cards right now.
Yeah.
For it.
Now
I like how Asmith agreed with that analogy, even though I'm pretty sure he has no idea what any of it meant.
Literally have never played Magic in my life.
Trade your 5 mana mythic dragon from the core set that's good in every standard deck, that's worth $50 for some reason, but will never see play in any other format, and after it rotates out of standard is worth $2 for some fetch lands that are going to be worth $20 or $50 forever. Like, do that.
That's so good. That is the best reference I've ever heard in my life. I could get behind that.
I mean, for those,
well, you're Lord Asmith, so I'm not allowed to argue with you today. But
I literally have no idea what you just said.
That makes perfect sense to the 3 people who know what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Yes. Well, that's gonna.
Someone comment on that. Someone send us a message about how you loved that reference or hated it.
They do every time we make Magic references, for the most part. Both of them messages every time.
We do. We get equal hate and love for all the Magic references.
Yes. But that's gonna end the conversation about the news and kind of the off the wall things that happened this week, and move us into. We've got a double block of leaders and feeders for you guys in this episode. We're going to be doing leaders and feeders for the week, and then we're going to be looking at them for the stage on the overall, and that's to set the stage for the conversation we'll be having next week about how things are going to change and be different from last stage. You know, we had this conversation when we were leading into stage 2, and I have no idea how right or how wrong we were, but maybe I'll look at those notes before we do next week's episode. But for this week, the leaders on the tank side, Lord Asmith, can you start us off with whichever one of these 3 gentlemen you would like to go with?
I mean, I think this. Oh, we're doing the weekly, yeah. Because obviously, I mean, look, we gotta lead it off with. I mean, the guy who's been the best tank in the league overall. He put up probably the best tank performance we've seen so far, and that's Gesture. He put up 345 points. We were talking about how rare it is to be in the 300-point club. He almost got to the 350-point club. Guess what? There's nobody in there. I don't think. Maybe Jonak. No, not even Jonak. Yeah, nobody's in that league. So he almost put himself in a league of his own this week. Number 1 tank, number 1 overall. His worst single match was the same as Poco's entire week. I mean, just that. These statistics are insane of what he was able to produce. Gesture, by far and away, was just incredible, always going to be incredible, especially since they don't have any other tank. As soon as Tizzy gets in, we might see a little bit less, but Gesture is just so far, by far and away, your tank leader / leader of this whole week.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we'll see Tizzy for like 1 match or something like that, in an easy matchup where they just want to get him some time on the stage in case he's needed or something like that. But even when Fissure was there, Gesture didn't come out very much, and we all know how good Fissure is. But Blevins, who do you have for your tank leader of the week this week?
One last thing about Gesture is that Jonak had a 341 week, which is as close as I think it has ever been had. So I've got Gamsu here. I mean, we've been talking about Boston and how they kind of uprose themselves near the end of the stage. We had the conversation about Kalios versus Gamsu. There was some internal strife that was potentially going on. Seems like they got over all that because Gamsu was the number 2 tank overall, had 282 points. Again, like putting himself very close to that 300 club, which there's a very small number of people that have gotten that, but you know, it seems that Gamsu is here to stay in the way that they're going, and it would be kind of crazy to think otherwise.
Yeah, and the number 3 DPS leader is the big surprise here. I think, tank leader is Nomi with 203 points, tied for the number 4 overall tank. Really helped out by the fact that he had 2 5-map sets this week, and we've talked about how beneficial it is when you think a matchup has the potential to go into 5. You really want to overvalue those players, and that's a large part of the reason why I wanted to make sure we talked about Nomi this week, because he was really boosted by those extra maps, and then also
you can't say boosted. You can't say boosted. You might get
he might get banned.
Buoyed. We'll go with buoyed. I've been playing too much Sea of Thieves. I've got to use sea references now.
When you think about him having 203 points, yes, that is good, but he had 10 maps, so like that's 20.3.
I'm also just going to throw this out there. That's probably why I have to call you Lord Asmith all week this week, is those 2 extra maps. But moving along,
100% is, but I saw it coming.
It's just worth pointing out though how much, and you know, something we've been kind of drilling for a while. So I think it's important to point out the evidence of it is that those extra maps make a big difference. I mean, Gamzu had 10 as well, and we already know what kind of week he had this week. Yeah. So
I mean, we're not doing it this week for time reasons, but I would definitely douse the flames on Nomi.
Yeah. Oh, there's just no. We'll douse flames next week. Is basically what it is. There's like 3/4 of our topics just don't make sense on this recap of this stage episode. But going on here, let's move into the support leaders for the week. Let's start out with Blevins for this one. Who is your support leader for this week, Blevins, and how did he do?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jaehong here. He had 201 points. It was good for the number 5 support overall. This is the first time this stage that he's had over 200 points. So while he was in the top 5 and was technically a leader this week, It's not, well, we'll talk about it in the stage recap, but has not really been indicative of his performance this entire stage.
Yeah, he's definitely had a bit of a rough stage, and they honestly had a bit of a rough week this week on the overall, right? Like they got beat 3-1 by Houston and got beaten up. I mean, fairly good in that match. Like they were handily beaten. And then they did get the win against Florida, but they dropped a map there, so that was I think probably good for him on the overall. If we look at his points on the week, I've got to bounce around. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He did better against Houston when they were beaten. So it was definitely really interesting. I almost view this as more of an anomaly. I mean, we know Jae Hong is a really, really good player, but one of the things I think we're going to be talking about on the flagship this week is how this isn't the Jae Hong I was advertised. Like, I was promised a top 3 Zenyatta player. I'm still willing to buy he's the #1 Ana player, but he's not even the Ana player on his team right now. I don't know. I'm feeling a little cheated by the Seoul Dynasty support line that I was told would be the best in the Overwatch League. But nonetheless, Jae Hong's points this week were great. Talking a lot about your support leader of the week and not doing my own.
He's not even in the top 10.
Yeah. But we've got the next one here. I'll take this one because I got to talk about my boy Raucus, the #3 support player on the week. 215 points. Really on the overall, he did better in the Seoul matchup here than he did against the Dragons matchup. And I think we've talked about how kind of easy claps are a little bit tough in fantasy sometimes to accrue points on. But Raucus has been a staple this stage, just been really, really strong, a really kind of breakout support player for fantasy purposes in this stage, and I think really cemented himself in that top 5 conversation going forward. But Asmith, Lord Asmith, who do you have for the last support leader for week 5, stage 2?
There we go. Last support leader we've got and he's the best one, and that's Neko. He put up 242 points, #1 overall support. This is the first time he's had 200 points this stage, but as you'll remember, we talked about him last stage. He did really, really well. He was, I believe he was the #2 overall support last stage. And then he's kind of had a fall from grace a little bit, but you saw a little bit of this return to form. Even though Boston had 10 maps, he still would have put up over 200 points. That's about what they were averaging, pretty close to. He would have been close to around just over 200 points, and that's still much better than what he was doing before. I like to see this, that Neko is kind of having this return to form feel. I could buy Neko, like him coming back into the good graces. I mean, we'll have to see, because it seems like the beginning of each stage, we have a weird Boston team, but Boston just played really, really well this last.
One thing I'll say in favor of your Boston fantasy players is they're repeating some maps now, right? Like the only completely new map to the stage will be, and I don't even know the whole map pool yet, but the only completely new map will be Blizzard World. The rest of them will be maps that they've already played. So hopefully there's half as much to learn, and maybe Boston doesn't start as far down as they have in stages past. But yeah, definitely seem to be a team that develops and adapts to metas over time better than most, because you see the teams that start at the top, sure, some of them stay there, but Boston's showing that drastic improvement over the course of each stage so far. All right, well, that wraps up the support leaders. Now we've got DPS leaders. I haven't gone first for one of these yet, so I'm going to take the duo group here at the top. And listen, we had 3 players this week in the 300 club, and the first one was Striker, and I'm taking his DPS partner as well, Dream Casper, who had 294 points. So 327 and 294 for the Boston Uprising DPS players. #1 and #3 on the week as far as DPS is concerned. So really, really big week from them. I was really, after I saw Gamzu and the team play with him last week, I just jumped right back all in. I thought these were going to be, the same team we saw at the close of last stage, which is to say, able to compete with anyone and do really, really well with absolutely anybody in this league. And they certainly showed it this week, as I believe, were they 2-0 on the week? blanking. It happened so soon ago, and I'm so wrapped up in the playoffs. Yeah. Okay. So 3-2 victories, though 3-2 over the San Francisco Shock, maybe a little closer than you'd wanted to see that one if you're a Boston fan.
Shock's better though.
They are definitely doing better, and did look at this week, but closed out the week against the LA Gladiators in a very important match. So, yeah, great to see Boston doing well again, at least for the players' sake. I won't say that about my love of the team on the overall. But moving on, Lord Asmith, talk to us about your DPS leader for this week.
Look, I'm going to take Prophet here. Prophet put up 304 points. The other player to hit the 300 club. This is his first 300-point performance this season, and he looked phenomenal. He only played 8 maps. 8 maps. And that was insane output. His tracer play has been probably, I would venture to say, very close to the best in the league so far. It's been phenomenal. This week especially was phenomenal to watch. Maybe not so much in the playoffs, but hey, what you gonna do? Regular season is what counts now for fantasy. And I mean, this guy, I cannot say enough good things about Prophet, and seeing as they haven't picked up another DPS player right now, there's a good chance that you're going to see Prophet a lot.
Yeah, 23 points less than Striker was on the week, and 2 less maps. The entire top 6 played at least 9 maps, to tell you how important those extra games are to fantasy output. Prophet stood alone as somebody that didn't have any extra time, but was very much so at the top of the list. And always the player I forget to mention right there with SBB for best tracers in the league, but definitely should never forget to mention Prophet in that conversation. Blevins, wrap up the leaders for the week for me.
Yeah, we got last one here, good old Munch. 219 points is good for the number 7 overall DPS player. I mean, it's slightly better than his normal performance. He's number 10 overall for DPS players. He got number 7 here, so definitely a good performance here for him. I mean, not really too much else to say for Munchkin, but it's looking good for him. It seems like they've figured out that they don't want to play Bunny as much. You know, for their A team, they've kind of got the A and B team, and it seems like they're bringing out their A team more so than their B team nowadays.
Yeah, and when they don't, they lose chances at the playoffs. So hopefully they stop doing that for their own sake pretty soon. But Munchkin definitely seems locked and loaded, ready to go for the Tracer starting position here. His only down week was when they played Bunny for a match, I should say, when he scored 89 points. But on the overall, Munchkin proving to be a top 10, very, very good. Probably, you know, DPS 2 is where you want to have him. One of the better second DPS players you can own.
Yeah, he's the first. He's the first tracer player that's outside of the top tier. Like it's the top 7 are all tracer, then it's Linkster, Dreamcasper, and then right after is Munchkin.
Yeah, so right up in there. Good to see from him, and good just from a fantasy perspective. Good to see clarity in at least one team's DPS role solidifying. But let's move in and talk about some feeders from this week. It's a little bit of a light list here, especially on the tank side. So, Lord Asmith, talk to us about your tank feeder for this week.
Tank feeder this week, Miro put up 74 points, and he was benched for Houston. We kind of alluded to that, but they benched them in a game that should have, I mean, it was a must-win game for them, and they lost.
And they benched Fleta too.
And they benched it was crazy to see.
And like what team, for some reason.
And he put up 74 points, which is not great for tanks anyway in the win. And we just look at how Kuki did in the game against Houston. He put up 42 points. They could have used some Miro in that game. He may not have done as well because he just didn't look that great even in their next win. I don't remember who they played, but even in the second game, the win, like Miro was not just world beater, amazing player for a fantasy perspective. And it was a real fall from grace for Miro in a way this week. Just, it looked to put him out, and we'll see what happens. I think they'll learn from this and move forward. But for now, Miro fed and caused you some serious problems.
Yeah, and it's tough to tell, right? Because it almost felt to me like the Fleta benching was overconfidence, right? Because they actually brought Fleta in for the last map to try to pull it back against Houston, and put anybody against Linkser in a Widow v Widow battle, that person's probably going to lose. So it was not the map to try to reverse on. But I do think Kuki over Miro might have been a bit of a tactical maneuver. We talked about when they were going to play against the Gladiators, how Houston does really, really well against the very aggressive dive teams. Their anti-dive style, it allows them to play Junkrat when you're just like suicide diving into them. So I thought Kuki over Miro might have been tactical, but at the same time, when you're also bringing in, I think it was Weekheed over Fleta, you're handicapping yourself significantly there, right? Like Fleta's one of the best in the league as far as DPS goes. Maybe he hasn't been this stage, but it was an interesting choice. But Blevins, talk to us about the second tank feeder for this week.
Yeah, we'll go with your boy Cool Matt. 96 points.
Made me a peasant.
I mean,
he made you a peasant.
He made me a peasant for sure.
No, me, not you.
Oh, he made you a peasant. Yeah, he made you. I was wondering what you're talking about out there. Yeah, we've kind of see this happen, and we'll talk about this in the stage here. But the long and short of it is Diva players have not fared super well in this stage, and Cool Matt has not survived that burden of Diva.
No, probably hurt by it more than most. I really think his kind of role with the team at the moment is to hang back and make sure Raucus stays alive. We've seen Raucus's point totals increase this stage, just as we've seen Cool Matt's drop. So I wonder if that's a bit of a shift in their play style, or maybe not even a shift, just this meta forces them into it. And that's really always been Matt's style, to be more of a protective diva. Definitely coming to fruition as he's not really a startable asset in fantasy at the moment. But moving on, let's talk about some support feeders, and I'll go first on this one. Oh man, the first two really kind of hurt my heart a little bit, and I don't really want to say them out loud. But the first support feeder of the week was Shaz. He was the number 13 support player. He only had 134 points. A bit of a downturn week for the LA Gladiators. I really went out on a limb and showed them some support, and they went 0-2 on the week as they opened and closed the matchups for the week. A little bit rough for them, and the supports felt it, but it's kind of like I've been saying about Philadelphia as the stage goes on, like they might be the team of the stage, right? So I'm not going to hang my head too much when I lose to them. Boston can play with anybody. So on the overall, it was a rough week for the LA Gladiators. Shaz has been so good on the stage overall. You just have to completely throw this out and ignore it and continue to play him. But just didn't do quite what you were hoping for this week. Blevins, who do you got number 2 here?
Yeah, I have the, maybe not so much anymore, but the biggest goose possible was certainly a smaller goose this week. He had 115 points, which is in fact the smallest goose he has been for the entire stage. I mean, same sort of story as Shaz here. I suppose. Let's see, Big Goose on the season is number 10 overall. He fell 9 spots. Shaz is number 2 overall. He fell 11 spots. So I guess technically Shaz was a bigger flop for you this week. But it's interesting. And again, we've talked about this before. Like some players just do better when they lose than others. I mean, we saw, I believe it was Houston, not Houston, Florida a few weeks ago. We saw them do across wins and losses as long as they got the map numbers under their belts. It didn't seem to be the case here, as they did go to I believe they played 9 maps a piece. So it's worth noting that that Shaz and Big Goose both, if they're not winning, they're not doing as good. So just keep that in mind when you're filling out your support roles here.
Yeah, if they're playing against some of the top teams, you're going to want to probably bring them down a little bit.
I want to swap them.
Asmith, wrap up the feeder combo for me.
Look, a feeder here is Chipsogen, number 78 points overall this week. Even though Dallas surged this week and looked much, much better, Chipsogen did not. He honestly has been kind of a disappointment in this Zen role that we've seen him, and he's been the first one dying in a lot of cases. Anytime you saw that, he was dying, and in the last 2 weeks he did even better than he did this week. Even though the team did better this week, Chipsogen did worse. It was kind of a weird situation. And honestly, he's been kind of a feeder overall, and I'd almost like to say Dallas's supports in general have been feeders, this whole area. So I just do not start Dallas supports unless you literally don't have another option.
Or you can start Harry Hook, he can get you 0 points, and you can still beat Asmith. Either one will work.
Zing!
The one
hey,
thing,
look, Harry Hook laid the biggest of gooses so far.
He did.
Also, for what it's worth, Lord Asmith.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But when I'm chiding him, I don't know. It feels wrong. Like, is it still respect? I don't know. I'll do it because I should.
Respect the crown.
But when when I'm cutting you, it's really hard to remember to do it. Is all I'll say.
It makes it even more important that you do.
All I'll say is just kiss the ring, okay?
But make sure you readjust once the main tank players stabilize for the Dallas Fuel. All I was saying is expect Chips to stabilize a little bit. Go back to maybe what he's been a few weeks ago, which is still not great, but a little bit better. They've been, the counter dive strategy really involves just like, okay, Zen, see ya. You're gonna die now, but hopefully you take one with you. And that's the style Dallas played this week. It's the style Philly's been playing. Especially in stage 1 when Boombox was having a brutal time of it. It's definitely something that a couple teams do, and Dallas was one this week. So,
or Dallas is just going to change their mind completely and go with a whole nother support because they tend to do that a lot. So
I still really think Harry Hook should probably be in there, but we will see. Let's look at the DPS feeders for this week in particular. The first one on the list, we talked about it, so I'll be brief. Baby Base pretty unplayable now. He only had 24 points this week. The number 29 DPS player. We advised you not to play him. Hopefully you listened. If you didn't, you should probably be listening now. Trade him. Do anything you possibly can. Blevins, who do you got for the DPS feeder?
Yeah, I got Hydration. It's a similar situation to the supports for LA Gladiators. He only played he played 6 maps, which, I mean, we've talked about Surefour, Hydration, and Asher being kind of interchangeable almost to the point where it was hilarious that they're like 19, 20, and 21 in the standings for the entire stage. But this week was not the case. We saw Hydration put up 50 points where Surefour had 138 and Asher only had 99. But we're seeing a little bit of a disparity. I mean, I would imagine that this would be obviously meta dependent. It's also, I think, got to be field dependent. I mean, there's just going to be some times where Hydration, Surefour is going to be like, okay, I'm putting my pants on. I'm staying in for this, this 5th map or whatever.
I got my big boy pants on.
I'm putting them on. Keep me in, coach. Like Kobe gets the ball at the end of the game, no matter what. And Hydration might not be Kobe for this team. And I think that's just how we've seen the teams materialize, is that it really with the Gladiators was the only team that was like, oh, we have 3 DPS and they're all like exactly the same. It's been like there's 2 and then there's like a sub, or there's like 1 and then there's 2 subs. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that start to materialize as one or two of the players start to develop that role for themselves.
Yeah, and one thing to
go ahead. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say here, and the reason why Hydration's here is he actually played more maps than Surefour, and it was 5 for Surefour, 6 for Hydration, 7 for Asher. So Surefour was the #1 scorer on the least number of maps there. So Hydration definitely a bit of a letdown performance, 27 and 25 points in each of those matches. So a bit of a brutal week for him in particular. But
I was gonna say, because he's a Genji too, I think that hurts. He doesn't play any Tracer, whereas Surefour and Asher play Tracer.
Yeah, so if it's Genji or if it's Pharah or if it's Doomfist, you can rely on Hydration 100%. But yeah, usage, my big point here is that usage wasn't the reason for this, right? His usage was consistent. Just the performance was on the lower end. So all right, that wraps up, I believe. Nope, we got one more. Okay, Lord Asmith has a DPS feeder for the week.
I'm gonna take right after I said this guy is gonna get his. The week after I say this guy's gonna get his regardless, he ends up on our feeder list, and that's soon. He put up 170 points for number 13 DPS, and you think, well, number 13 DPS, that's still pretty good, right? I mean, Yeah, except he's pretty much bottom of the barrel when it comes to tracer players. He was very, very poor. The only tracer players that were below him were Surefour, Asher, and I mean, if we count whatever the Shanghai Dragons throw out, I don't even count them as
We don't count
an option.
MG
so.
doesn't count as a tracer player,
Yeah.
even if he
Yeah,
plays
so-
tracer.
So I mean, you know,
I did worse than him too.
Yeah, but the only thing you can say is the team just looked bad. And Agility's his counterpart put up 44 points in 8 maps. I mean, the team itself looked bad and soon actually put up a substantial amount of points comparatively to how the team themselves played, because the rest of the team did not really get their points at all. So in Soon's defense, he still performed very well considering how poor the team did. But he's still a feeder.
Yeah, still just underperformed on the week. And for what it's worth, there's rumors from Slasher about some discontent, I think is the right word. Yeah, they're talking about wanting to bring in a Korean tracer player. There's rumors that Nene will be signed for the LA Valiant before the close of the acquisition period here, and there's also talk of them actively shopping Soon and Unco in trades. So
Don't do it. Don't do it.
This wasn't one of the rumors, but it was on the actual LA Valiant video piece, is that Kareev actively wants to be a support.
Yeah, it looks like he's headed back that direction and bringing Agilities back into the lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see how things move forward for the LA Valiant team, who seems to struggle with some pretty serious inconsistency problems. Though a lot of times when we think they're playing really well, they're just playing against teams that are slumping, like when they played against Houston this stage, things like that. But they've been difficult to pin down, and I expect them to continue to be difficult to pin down as the rest of the season plays out.
I mean, they've been like that since Immortals, where they've been on top of the world and then right back to the bottom, and then lather, rinse, and repeat.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, all I gotta say is you just need to take them to In-N-Out Burger afterward. Change their mind.
It definitely improves my mood, nonetheless, when you take me to In-N-Out Burger, even though I've never been there.
Have a weird one-on-one with your CEO in a rainy car in front of a Taco Bell,
It's amazing.
Well, moving on here, we're going to talk about some leaders and feeders for the stage, and especially the leaders here. We can be pretty brief and run through them pretty quickly. Yeah. These are just the number 1 through and they're the number 1 through 3 scorers for their particular roles in the stage. We did isolate the stats by stage only, so I'll start things off in the tank section here, and we'll talk about Gesture. He's a beast. Number 1 overall, 31.10 points per map. That is the highest among all players, regardless of positions. He scored 1,418 points. If we look very far back there, we can see the number 2 player, and Lord Asmith will tell you who that is. Who's number 2 on this list, Asmith?
Look, number 2 on this list is Fisher. Formerly Gesture's, B-League, B-team player, and that is, he put up 1,193 points overall, and that is good enough for 2nd overall in this list. Is that not crazy that we have 2 tanks that are 1 and 2 overall? That's a flip of script that we've ever seen. But Fisher on this new team looks to be something to dominate. And if you got him on a bargain bin, you did well, sir.
Yeah, definitely a big surprise, I think. I mean, everybody expected him to do well. I didn't expect him to fit in this well with his new home instantaneously and take off like this. But Blevins, who's number 3 on this list here?
Yeah, it's fate. I mean, he was number 1
always
for the
fate,
longest
right?
time.
It just always seems to be fate here in this conversation.
It almost, it's kind of crazy that him at number 3 almost feels like a feed, but obviously it's not. I mean, he's been super good for the LA Valiant, regardless of whether they're winning, losing, or otherwise. He's playing all the time, and he's being really, really good. Not much more to say about fate.
Yeah, much like the number 3 support player here, I feel like he got here on the back of almost, if not never, being at the very top of the list of points scored on the week, but just never being below 5 under any circumstances. Really consistent player.
He literally has 2 weeks out of 10 where he went under 200 points.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
The level of consistency he has for fantasy owners is unmatched for sure.
It's like Libero. He's the third best player at every single hero, but the best at only Hanzo.
Well, Blevins, we'll let you gush about the #1 support player for the week, but try to keep it as brief as you can. I know you literally do a whole Jonak fan show on a weekly
anyone
basis.
Gonna guess at who the #1 support overall is? If you guess anything about Jonak, you clearly have not. You don't have eyes or ears or mouth or nose. It's Jonak.
You can smell how good he is, folks.
I feel like
you can smell
that was the whole point. Yeah, I mean Jonak. The only thing to note here is that he went from being like basically a ladder player that NYXL picked up. Was, you know, people knew about him from like anecdotes, and he came out, he was absolutely dominant, and then never let up. Like we've seen kind of some of the other players kind of let up and like tear off, but Jonak has just been ungodly good.
One of the only hyped players going into the Overwatch League that's like completely lived up to it without it. Like never even for a minute not looked like what he was sold to us as. And that's the best Zenyatta in the world, hands down. It's definitely what he's been so far. Lord Asmith, who's #2 on this list?
#2 on this list is somebody who kind of a little bit surprising, but really not as much as you would think, because Shaz has just been good since any time that we've remembered with Giganti. Right, Blevins, as you say, Giganti.
That is correct.
Yeah, Blevins will never forget Fraggy terrified him.
So Shaz put up he put up 1,000 even.
Yeah.
What are the odds that he put up 1,000 even? Anyways, that's
I don't know what's more impressive, being #2 or an even number like that. Like both really impressive.
I mean, super impressive. I'm not going to go into statistics and never. Just go on.
We're going. Anyways, so Shaz did really good. Supports on the overall did not do as well. Was probably the weakest position in stage 2.
Yeah, Shaz definitely helped live up to some of the hype that I was putting out there, of that this may by far one of the most underrated players in Overwatch League. I'm glad to see the tank play came in to really help him show it off this stage. #3 though
is interesting that.
Go ahead.
Interesting that the supports have like with our expert league, the second one we did in the new scoring system, everyone valued supports super high. And I mean, obviously that was because of Mercy for stage 1, but they've position overall for stage 2.
You cut out a little bit, so
changed with it. Yeah, the meta has kind of changed that a little bit.
Everyone valued support super high in stage 1 because of Mercy, and now they've been the weakest in stage 2, which is just kind of interesting to point out.
Yeah, I think part of that value was scarcity, because that was one position where it looked like even going into it. I mean, the Mercies helped, and it was still seemed like a scarce position at the time. But the #3 player on this list is by far the biggest shock to me, pun absolutely intended, because Sleepy is #3 on the support list here. 960 points from Sleepy. I'm trying to remember, I think there was one week he was like a support leader on the week, so really embodying the captain consistency that I was talking about with Fate here as well on the support side of things. Just a locked and loaded starter. I don't know what else to say. I knew he was better when he had the Lucio in his pocket. They've been showing us that from the preseason even. That meta was very friendly to them running the Lucio. Now that Moth is here, I'm hoping this even maybe goes up a little bit better, but we will have to wait and see. Got my attention, Sleepy. I'm not sleeping on you any longer. Moving on here, though, we've got some DPS leaders for the week, and let's start off with who hasn't gone first. It was Lord Asmith has to go first.
Okay, I'll go. I think this is another player that had been really hyped this season, and when we were kind of hearing about this meme team that Boston put together when we first started, everyone was like, well, Striker's really, really good. And I think he's lived up to it just as much as Jonak has. Maybe not quite as much, because Jonak is just ridiculous. But overall, Striker put up 1,186 points, best tracer so far, and he has a backup. It's not like he's being forced to play every match like Jonak or Gesture is, but or Shaz even, Striker has a backup, and he's just better, straight up. And 1,186 points is no joke. And he was, I believe he was in the top 2. I believe he was second at last stage. So he's shown his consistently good, and I believe right now he's the player on the season.
Yeah, he's definitely been a surprise, and I know we did a couple of hot seats before the season with some of these players, and more than one of them told us Striker was the most underrated player and going to be a surprise. Yeah,
is I think Grim Reality's exact words.
Yeah, phenomenally accurate, Grim. So good job. I'm sure your accuracy is just as good in game, but we don't get to see it. So rip. Number 2 on this list is Prophet. We talked about him a little bit earlier, so we won't go into too much detail, but number 2 DPS, 1,167 points. Right up there in the conversation of among the best tracers in Overwatch League on the team, with very probably, when they use them, the best overall DPS line here, and the best tank, and there's a lot going on for London right now in a good way. But yeah, we will have to wait and see exactly how it all plays out. But right now, Prophet seems to be, one of, if not the best DPS players you can have. Who is number 3? Blevins, we saved him for you. You can talk about your boy here.
My boy, SBB, 1,109 points. Good for number 3 overall in the DPS. Worth noting that you guys talked on this very episode last stage, SBB being a feeder. Not been the case here. We've obviously seen the just utter and sheer dominance of Tracer, SBB being one of the best, if not the best, maybe not from a fantasy perspective, but very, very good Tracer players, also playing a Widow here and there as well. But I think probably the biggest thing in terms of SBB's points is that Pine just went MIA this stage. So I don't know if well, we'll talk about this next episode, but SBB might be a little too on fire right now.
Yeah, but nonetheless, giving you a little bit of that capital you used to acquire him, with very likely a first round pick in your draft. So great to see it, even if it doesn't last. More on that next week, as it sounds like Blevins might have a hot take. All right, so feeders for the stage on the overall, we've got at the tank position 1 feeder. And since he is royalty, we might as well let Lord Asmith read us off this feeder.
Look, this feeder is not a he, it is a she, and that feeder...
Wait, she hasn't even played yet.
Oh, no, she played.
It's Diva! It's Diva! Diva is the she, it's not a player.
You debated me.
Character.
Yeah, get debated, everybody.
Character in the game. Diva has been a complete and utter feeder for everybody. Mekos, who was an amazing scorer, Envy, who was a great scorer, Cool Matt, who was a great scorer last season. All since this new Diva playing all the time and the revitalized, the whole meta change, Diva has just become a literal feeder, and all of your Diva players that you might have drafted a little too high, it's just hurting you. And
give me Winston and give me some giant hammer man.
I mean, we all need the hammerman in our...
But yeah, those three Diva players, I think, are most people's top 3 in the world. They're definitely right up there if they're not, and the fact that we're looking at these guys, Fate number 10, Meko number 12, and Cool Matt number 19, just really speaks to how punishing, I guess, that bug is that doesn't let them track ultimates or whatever it is that's keeping these Diva players down. It's definitely more than just that, as the point totals don't lie, but...
Diva is also getting a nerf on PTR, so that is potentially going to be coming.
It's okay, because Cool Matt will be the best Brigitte player in the world. I can see it. Yeah. I can feel it in my bones. Yes, for stage 4. But moving on here, we've got some support feeders for the stage. Number 1, I'll grab this one. We've got... I put him here, so I'm going to take it. I'm giving it to Jae Hong. He was the number 11 support player, 741 points. Listen, this is one spot below a very large goose that plays for the Los Angeles Gladiators. And much like Diva is kind of the second fiddle in the tank lineup here, Lucio is significantly behind the scoring output potential that a good Zenyatta player has. And I don't feel like I'm getting the Jehong that was advertised going into Overwatch League. I was promised a top
like
3,
number 1 or 2
yeah,
overall pick.
like one of, if not the best Zenyatas in the league, and I'm definitely not getting that from a fantasy perspective, and I don't think I'm getting it from an Overwatch perspective. I also, I'll be honest, I don't think the support line is necessarily the biggest problem for Seoul at the moment, but nonetheless, they used to be what carried this team, and they're just not carrying them to the very top end right now anymore. And that's also evidenced by number 2 on this list, who I'm going to let Blevins give here.
Yeah, it's Toby. I mean, you talked a lot about it, and Seoul has really, in a lot of ways, shot themselves in the foot in so many ways. They're B team. They're just not. I don't know. Something's going on with Seoul, and it's interesting that a team of that caliber is taking this long to get their ducks in a row, so to speak. So, man, I don't know. A Seoul dynasty. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not that bad to be an owner of these players, but man, it is not what you paid for.
Yeah, you're probably not doing well, and not because they've been brutally bad, but because you paid for phenomenal and you're not getting it. And Toby is kind of like Bigus is what Toby was supposed to be right now, and that's a Lucio player that would be a Lucio player that would be kind of at the bottom end of the top starting guys,
Toby,
despite the player. Yeah, he's literally the boot god.
Points?
And we're just not seeing it right now. So hopefully. No. They find a way to up their game.
I'll just say this. I'm pretty sure Apex literally broke the Seoul Dynasty's backs. It just broke their backs. They couldn't carry anymore. Too much Apex.
It could be, but Lord Asmith, talk to us about the last support feeder for the stage.
The last support feeder hits close, near and dear to my heart, because in the new scoring system, I did not follow my own advice, and I went with a player, and that is Bedozin at number 2 overall. That's where I picked him. And for this stage, he put up 613 points, number 14 overall position, overall support this stage. But what I will say is, the problem is it's not about how good he is. It's not about how dominant he is. He's been a great, probably one of the top 3 Zenyatta players in the world. I would venture to say.
It's fair.
But the problem is playtime. It's not Bedo's in, it's Bedo's out. Not in. And
see you later.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting shadow burned by that.
That's it, man. He's putting up 28 points per map. That is number 2, just behind Jehong in points per map. If he were putting up that many points, if he were playing that many maps, he would be just shy behind Jehong. But he's not. He's not playing the maps for some reason.
Jonak has 30.26 points per map.
28, I mean, comparatively, look, the next person is like 22, 24.
Yes,
okay,
Blevins. So, that means when it's number 2, then there's one person that's higher than him. Yeah.
You said behind Jehong. You said behind Jehong.
Did I say Jehong? I meant Jonak.
Yeah, you said Jehong.
I apologize for my actions.
Making sure we.
I missed that one.
But confuse the king.
Yeah, I mean,
confuse the king here.
Bedozin has 51 maps played. When we look at Jonak and Shaz, they have 76. We got Raucus at 77, Neko 78. That's what, I mean, even if he's somebody that maybe gets subbed out a little bit on rare occasion, we're looking at Boombox with 68. It should be a much higher number, much closer to 70 for Bedozin. He's certainly playing well enough to warrant the play time. The only thing that's not happening is the coaches are deciding to play Hagopwen, and it makes no sense. Stop that.
No sense. Stop it.
Bad London. Anyways, moving on.
Roster decisions.
Well, maybe if they didn't fire their coach because people were mad about how he was using their players, maybe they would. Maybe they would have
the point being their team during most of their maps.
Maybe they would have won stage 2 had they not fired their. Oh, what? Sorry. Too soon?
Could have been. I don't know. They clearly did pretty well on the overall for the stage. So I don't want to blast them for their overall finish in the playoffs. But just looking at this, like, there's no metric to make sense of this. When you look at what Hago's done, we're talking about this is fantasy points, which doesn't have to matter to them, but it's the metric I have in front of me, so it's what I'm going with. 22.8 points per map versus 28 for Bedosin. 22 is pedestrian. That's the number 10 to 15 players, right? That's not anything crazy to write home about. You could get that from a lot of players that they could have signed. Only Bedosin on this lineup has the upward potential and possibility that they really should go with. But let's take a look at the DPS feeders to kind of wrap things up here. We did successfully manage to get to a full-length episode, regardless of the half the content. But let's start off with Blevins here. Who's your first DPS feeder?
I'm gonna go here with the one that we actually came about last when we saw this very interesting tidbit here. Fleta is going to be your DPS feeder, number 16 overall, 660 points. I mean, he's tied with Jake. That's where that was the real eye opener for us in the pre-show when we were talking about this. Fleta definitely for old scoring system was a number 1 overall pick for a lot of people. I believe he didn't go number 1 in our draft, but he went number 2 and probably should have went number 1. Being number 16, I'm going to leave it at that. Number 16 is that is a huge feed for what you paid for him. I mean, I think it's the sole mismanagement of the, maybe not mismanagement, but just like not being able to find their footing. The fact that non-tracer DPSs are just really not putting up the points. So, you see Fleta dominate on Widowmaker. That's all fun and good, but it's Munchkin and Bunny that are really getting your fantasy points.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, all the Jake jokes aside, the big reason why that's so telling is because Jake sat like a quarter of the stage by not playing in map 1 of every single match until the final week of the stage. So when you're talking about partial playing time, a player of Fleta's caliber, you just need to be getting more than that. And like you said, we're talking about a top 3 pick in most every single league that started at the beginning of the season. So definitely a surprise. Go ahead.
Fleta actually has played 7 fewer maps than Jake, so that's interesting.
Yeah, though way too much subbing out of him is definitely happening. Hurting him in fantasy, but I think either way, if you project him out those 7 maps to tie him with Jake or whatever, like it would still be a pretty big disappointment for Fleta owners. For sure. But the DPS I want to talk about here is agilities. And listen, we've known like it hasn't killed you too bad, right? Because once Kareev came in, you knew it was going to happen, so it only like killed you in 1 week. But there's this telling stat here. He's the number 26 DPS player, 271 points. The man has 17 more points than Snillo, who didn't unlock until week 4. That's not getting it done.
Snillo had more points today in the playoffs than Agility said.
that could be sure with like the 3 maps he got off in those 2 matches. Or
probably had more points against London in Route 66.
Yeah, and listen, Agility is a player that maybe wasn't at the top of the list, but I thought he was somebody. I mean, even when he was like substituting with Silkthread and not playing full time, he was being significantly more productive with his play time than he has been this stage. So a big disappointment. But I think if Kareev
points, that's like 100 points. That's like almost 100 points less than what Jester had this week.
Yeah, Jester crushed his stage this week alone. That's definitely true.
I mean, Undead beat him this week, and Undead has literally left the.
But I do think if with Kareev going back to support, though, I think Agilities has a fairly good chance to rebound here. So somebody to keep an eye on. I wouldn't go about dropping him quite yet, but you definitely need to have those DPS 3. I mean, you guys can make all your snide comments all you want. You have to start 3 DPS players in most situations anyways. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the first 2, but
I mean, in new scoring system, I'd rather take tanks right now.
I'll take a tank over Agilities.
What tank are you going to pick up? You're going to in exchange for
combat over Agilities 100%.
Right now, yes, so would I, 100%. But I'm talking about potential for getting better in the future. You guys are saying cut the man. I'm saying Kareev's a support player again. Until they bring in more DPS players, Agilities is going to see playing time. He's got to be owned.
Did you see him play this week? He put up 11 points in.
Hold on, this sounds like
so you saw him play this week, right? You saw him play this week, right?
Sounds like a 3-way Lord bet.
No, it sounds like two people disagree with me, and it's not. We're not doing Lord bets this week because when are we going to know? How is it going to be possible to know?
It's going to be
long term, a multi-week.
And then how long is it going to go on for? No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I'm not calling somebody a king for an entire stage. It's not going to work. But I'm going to take this point. You said yourself. Hold on. You said yourself. You saw him play this week, right? Yes, I did. You did too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and he's been good in the past, right? He's been startable in the past for the team we just saw him play again for the first week in 5 weeks, right? So he's got potential, and he should be owned. I'm just saying don't drop the guy. I'm not saying bring him into your lineup and start him right away. Okay. Let's not let jokes get in the way of telling people to cut the man that's about to get a lot more play.
That's fair, but if you did listen to the video, where sat him down in this dark, rainy car, he did say, this is his last chance, and he said, if you don't earn it, you will not be back in the starting lineup. He said that. And did you not recall that? And did you see him play?
He could lose his job to Silk Thread. They could make another acquisition. Until that happens, I'm just saying don't cut the guy. I'm just saying, that's all I'm saying is don't drop him for 8-0, or you know what I mean? Like don't go pick him up for nothing. Like he still has value on your bench right now.
And I'll agree with you there.
Okay, so it took a lot of pain and effort to get you guys just to say, don't drop him yet.
I think a king bet is after 3 weeks.
If after 3 weeks he's got more than 200 points, I think I should win that. But I don't think you guys are going to take that bet.
More than Cool Matt.
More than Cool Matt?
No, I just said I would start Cool Matt over him first. It's an upside conversation. When you're talking about a bench player, it's an upside conversation. That's a terrible bet.
Okay.
Lord Asmith.
It's a good bet for us.
Right. I get why you guys want it, but there's no way in hell I'm taking it. So Asmith, Lord Asmith, who is the third DPS feeder for this stage.
Hold on. Wait. Would you rather own OGE or Agilities?
Oh, easy.
It's gonna be lineup
after 3 weeks.
It's probably gonna be lineup dependent. It's probably gonna be lineup dependent, to be perfectly honest with you. Like if I need DPS players because I'm like starting Gladiators as my #1 DPS, that's a very different conversation to me.
I mean, okay, if you have literally 0 DPS, then sure.
Well,
but as long as you have one DPS player,
that is currently 7-0, so I wouldn't knock that strategy.
Like I said, there's not a ton of people I would like bench to play Agilities. All I'm saying is don't cut the guy.
What you're saying is he's not #1 overall pick worthy. I think I recall him being a #1 overall pick.
Okay, well, whenever Lord Asmith decides with his it's his lordly decision to talk about the last DPS feeder of the lordly stage, we can go.
All right. We're gonna talk about birdring because we just mentioned how Bedeau's was Bedeau's out, and he was not Bedeau's in. Well, birdring has been I don't know. I can't come up with a good pun there.
BirdrOUTg? BirdrOUTg. Because in is in his name.
Yeah.
BirdrOUTg.
Try to pronounce that. I just fixed it in the notes for you.
BirdrOUTg. Anyways, he put up 574 points, #20 overall this stage. Look, with the trade of Rascal, Profit has been in the whole time, and London has been doing all sorts of crazy bananas things with their roster, and that includes starting Hureg over Birdring, and it has just not been good. So Birdring has been disappointing for you, but he is a great player, and if London gets their act together, Birdring will be great again.
Now, this is where I say he might be a feeder, but we definitely don't want to do anything crazy like cut or trade the man. And I don't know how much giggle juice you guys have had in the last, I don't know, while we've been doing the feeders here for the stage. But hopefully we can all agree on that. But
I agree.
Okay, good.
Well, I hate Birdring because he like single-handedly took down NYXL in the stage 1 playoff.
So Blevins is cutting him. Blevins is turning Birdring into BirdrOUTg. I like it. Okay.
Yeah, I want nothing to do with garbage player. Garbage player, garbage human.
That's what's ahead of me,
Oh,
and that's what. Wow. That's what's beating me. That attitude right there is what's beating me in 2 fantasy leagues, guys. So just know.
You need to listen to what I'm saying because it's my heart that knows what to do here. That is cut birdring.
If you're in a league with me, please cut birdring. I would appreciate
Yeah,
it.
100%. I will take him.
To wrap up the show here, we want to talk about a couple of things that surprised us this stage, things that we can try to think about when we're looking at next week and how we try to predict how things might change next week. And the first one on this list of stage 2 surprises is EQO in over Shadowburn. It happened right away, and then it got reversed when EQO got sick after arriving, but it did turn out to be the new change for this team. EQO took the starting job from Shadowburn, crushed a lot of my fantasy teams and a lot of my dreams. But nonetheless, it's just, I don't even know that there's much analysis to put behind this one, but just one of those things when you have players on the bench that are like unlock or join a team or something like that, and you don't know what they are yet, there's always this chance. Anything else really to add to that conversation here, guys?
EQO good. He good. Real good.
EQO good.
Yeah.
G-U-D good.
It's the locked players that got picked up beforehand seem to be seems like they've been picked up for a reason despite us not knowing about them. So just keep that in mind with players like Super. If you've never seen any of the LG Evil or Sports Days.
Oh my goodness. I deleted it, and I'm mad I deleted it off the soundboard, but instead of the trumpets, I used to have ZP saying, and the hammer is soaked in the blood of his enemies. And that was literally talking about Super, and it would have just been the perfect opportunity to play it, and I'm really mad it's gone now.
Yeah, I'm upset.
Yeah,
Next time.
I am sad. But the second thing on the list of surprises here is the Fissure trade to the Los Angeles Gladiators, and coupled with that was the massive improvement that gave to mostly the support players from a fantasy standpoint, but definitely from the DPS players too from an eyeball test standpoint. So new additions can make very, very big differences. Any particular situations, maybe with tanks being added, where maybe Lord Asmith sees an opportunity where maybe a bunch of people start to get better? This is your chance to say it where I won't mock you for it, Asmith.
What?
OGE is going to be joining the Dallas Fuel. It has a chance to make this team
okay. I was like, well, I don't know where you're going with this. Yes, OGE. I like him. OGE is going to be really good. Those players that have been locked or just added, they can make a dramatic difference in the league and as a whole, and can turn your fantasy team from a 0 to a hero in a matter of seconds. Your team can go from undefeated for 3 weeks in a row and just tearing it up to all of a sudden utter garbage because of trades that happened and ransacked your fantasy team.
Yeah, and since there hasn't been a ton of really follow-up or analysis on these things, I'm going to let you two say the next 2 surprises here. So, Blevins, give me your stage 2 surprise from this past stage of Overwatch League.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Fraggy's improvement. We talked about we talked about thinking that Fraggy was going to be one of the top scoring tanks back in stage 1. Didn't really happen. We saw the aggression really not pay off for him. And I mean, before new scoring system, I mean, he was literally getting negative point weeks. But obviously with new scoring system, he's getting there. And even in just his style of play, you can see if you look at his late stage 2 play versus some of his early stage 1 play, it's like, okay, he's all of a sudden playing his Winston much more conservatively, and he's playing with the team much more than he was. I mean, you still see him swinging the hammer around with Reinhardt. That just is Fraggy. But the team, either the team has really felt that that's what he's going to do and they're overcompensating for it, but also he is, not wasting. He's not, jumping in, alting his Winston and then jumping in further and then dying. It's, he's actually jumping back out, getting rehealed up and then going back in. So we've seen a real drastic improvement for Fraggy on the overall.
Yeah, escaping with little bits of HP like you see Muma do all the time, and like you see Fissure and Gesture do, instead of just kind of staying in there and dying and being finished off. It's definitely made a big difference. But hey, Smith, what's your stage 2 surprise?
off.
Yeah, I think the biggest I think the biggest surprise for me was how dominant Tracer has been in this stage. Tracer literally, her points, I mean, she was a must pick in stage 1 and her points weren't as glaringly dominant as they have been in this stage. And Tracer players have been by far and away better than every other non-Tracer player. Genji, Farah, all your projectile players, Tracer has just been so much better that it's better to own a subpar Tracer player than it is to own a top tier projectile player. And Tracer's dominance in general, I'm not sure it's going to continue on, but it has been a shock to me how dominant and crazy it has been.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's going to bring us very close to the end of the show, but we do have one mailbag question that we're going to ask, and it comes from the Bellman, and he wants us to pick 3 Overwatch League players to be on our Sea of Thieves crew. That's a game that has completely gripped my interest since its release. I'm hopelessly addicted to it already. But it's just a really, really fun, cooperative, social game that doesn't take itself very seriously at all, so there's a lot of room for goofiness. It's one I'm personally hoping we see some of these teams play like on stream and make some content about. I think it could be that fun. So we each need to pick 3 Overwatch League players to join us. Asmith, let's start with you. I think you had some thought built into this one already.
Okay, I do have a little bit of thought built into this, but last second I decided to make a couple of changes because this is really fun, but I think I'm going to take the handsomest player in the league, and that's going to be Kareev. He just seems like a fun person to play with, and I can just imagine his hysterical laughter in the background every time we're doing something, just Kareev just like rolling, laughing, like randomly shooting off into the water, shooting, into the sky, just doing whatever you can. I've never played the game, so I don't know exactly what the limitations are, but I can just see Kareev doing crazy stuff that would just be really, really fun. Second guy I'm going to take here, I'm going to take Surefour, better known as Tasuni. Sami? I don't know how he pronounces it.
Who knows?
You know exactly what I'm talking about. But I could just see Surefour just having so much fun with that and just being really goofy and fun. And all he needs is his purple wig. And that's going to be a fun game. And last player, I'm not going to take the obvious pick here because it's just too obvious. But I think the last player I'm going to pick is Rascal. And I know this is kind of a weird pick, but have you heard him in comms?
Please kill cool. No, it was a fact.
But Rascal seems really interesting to hear in comms, and I don't know why, but I just like sometimes different voice inflections when I'm playing games with people. Mm-hmm. Some things just make me have fun, and just somebody's goofy sounding voice in his broken English would just be really fun to play with. It might be a little frustrating, but who cares? It's Sea of Thieves, and you're not like trying to kill everybody. You're just having fun.
Well, you play Sea of Thieves differently than I do, but Blevins, you've got a couple hours in that game. Okay, none of them with me, which I do take personal offense to, but tell us who your ideal Sea of Thieves crew is.
For some reason, when I was thinking of this, I was thinking like, we're not playing the game together. We're literally inside of Sea of Thieves and we're actual players. I don't know why I thought of it like that, but nonetheless, the answers are still the same. First and foremost, I mean, obviously, if I'm going to have a pirate, I want the best beard, so I'm going with Fraggy here. That was a pretty obvious one. I think
you're cutting out, Blevins. You're cutting out pretty bad. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to give my team. We've got Fraggy on Blevins' team, and while he stabilizes his internet, I'll give you my crew. Listen, my first pick here, I think, is going to be a surprise, and I'm taking Soon. Nobody backcaps like Soon, okay? He's always the one that's sneaking around behind enemy lines, so I've got Soon with an explosive barrel boarding my enemy's ship. They're not going to notice him because nobody's sneakier than Soon. Number 2 on my crew, I'm taking the Jake Rat. Listen, cannons are a projectile, and no weapon in Overwatch is more like a cannon than Junkrat's primary fire. Gotta take Jake. He'll sink ships like that. I believe it in my heart. Now, I do need to have a little fun, and Jake seems like he could be a fun guy, but I don't know for sure. He's a serious guy, I think, right? I gotta have some fun. I'm taking the only correct answer here. Fraggy was pretty good, but I need Mickey. If I need somebody that I can goof around with and just constantly be super happy all the time. I'm so glad Blevins' internet crapped out, because that means I get to steal Mickey, and now you've got to replace
That was a
him in
low
your
I
list.
was talking about.
But
I wanted Mickey.
well, your internet's all fixed, Blevins, and I stole Mickey, so you're up.
Okay, so here's my pick. So I've got it's me and Fraggy. I might as well continue the beard thing. So we're gonna get Zebosai as well. And you know what? Let's just round it out. We'll take Zappos too. I mean, he's only got the goatee, but it is a pretty great goatee. So what we're gonna do? We've also actually, you know what? I'm cutting Zappos and I'm taking Big Goose. And here's the reason: we're gonna be the beefiest team. So we're gonna board DeathBlow ship, and we're gonna take Mickey hostage and turn him in as a prize. That's
Hold
what
on.
we're doing.
Are you going to try
if
not
that
to sink
team?
your own ship while doing this?
I was gonna say, if that team of yours jumps on a boat that I'm already on, I think we've exceeded some form of limit. But yeah, all in all, I think those are pretty solid Sea of Thieves crews. Hopefully, there's some form of ridiculous land Sea of Thieves tournament at the All-Star games. I don't know how that would work. I don't think Sea of Thieves has the functionality built into it.
I have one additional honorable mention. If I'm going for I'm going to abduct Mickey crew. I also want D-Pay on my team, the coach for the LA Gladiators.
Oh man, if he shoulder checks my ship, it's done.
It's
It's done.
He's going to be ramming your ship.
One shoulder tackle from D-Pay will shut down any ship in Sea of Thieves 100%. Well, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys drank your giggle juice but in the middle of the feeder section.
I still think we should have a king bet.
For this, you're the only one. Well, yeah, obviously, you guys wanting the king bet so bad really answers all the questions you need to know about why that king bet's not going to happen. But nonetheless, that does bring us to the end of the episode. And guys, this is the first episode that hasn't been on the regular High Noon podcast feed. So hopefully you guys found it okay. We really appreciate you guys joining us over onto the new feed. That does mean you can leave comments and ratings and things on the episode. We will search them out and read them on the show. At the end of every episode, starting with next week, so we really appreciate it. Please do follow our Twitter. It's at FOWL play. I don't think there's any...
It's HNP_foul play.
I forget it every time. It's the underscores. They get me. I keep taking them and adding them and removing them and everything from all our things. HNP_foul play on Twitter. You can also follow at High Noon Podcast and reach us there as well. Please join the Discord, discord.me/High Noon Podcast. We will see you all there. That's where you can submit your mailbag questions. We'll need a lot of them for next week, so please do submit them. Thank you guys all so much for joining us. For the Blevins and for Asmith, we will see you all next week.
See you.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world.